Hello, hello, welcome to the Cozy Corner. I am your host this evening, and we are going to be taking a look at Joan is Awful, the first episode in the newest season of Netflix's anthology, Black Mirror. If you happen to not be familiar with Black Mirror, it is, like I said, an anthology series where each episode revolves around a different sort of thought experiment regarding technology and its influence on humanity. Lots of the episodes revolve around a protagonist struggling with something in their life and seeking help through some sort of technological advancement, usually resulting in their downfall. I have been quite a long time fan of the Black Mirror catalog. I started watching back when season 3 first came out, and ironically, I actually watched it backwards at the time, starting with season 3 and then progressing back up to season 1. Was not intentional, but was probably a great thing because if I had started with season 1, I probably wouldn't have made it past the first episode. That's no shame to season 1. It's still great. I like it. It's just definitely not a great start for a show like this. Some rather infamous episodes you might be familiar with are ones like Million Merits, White Christmas, White Bear, and the one that I initially was introduced with, Nosedive. I think Nosedive gained a lot of recognition online for its theme of social media influence and how a ranking system could really hinder us as a society. I think the reason it stood out for a lot of people was because the comparison with real-world social media really matched the in-episode version, which is racked up to 11, really. Other episodes I know gained a lot of recognition that I saw a lot of people talking about back in the day were ones like Shut Up and Dance, USS Callister from season 4, and Striking Vipers, although that last one kind of got recognition for a completely different reason. Anyway, today we are going to be discussing the newest season, starting with the first episode, Joan is Awful. I'm going to try not to spoil the entire episode, but with the nature of Black Mirror, a lot of the episodes have really big 180 turns, so if I unintentionally spoil something, I'm sorry. So, this right here is your spoiler warning. The official description of Joan is Awful reads as such. An average woman discovers a global streaming service has adapted her daily life and her secrets into a drama starring A-list actress Salma Hayek. We are immediately introduced to Joan as we follow her through her daily life for the day. She gets up, gets ready for the day, she eats breakfast with, I believe, her fiancé. She goes to work, has to fire somebody against her wishes. She also accidentally drops a e-cigarette on her head as the girl is walking out the door. Way to kick a girl when she's down, Joan. She goes to a therapy session where she discusses with her therapist about how she's kind of just not into life right now, mentioning that she feels like she's just going through the motions every day and misses some of the excitement that she used to have, specifically with her ex. Speaking of her ex, she also meets up with him that evening and has a drink and a little saucy kiss at the end. By the end of the day, she's back home wanting to relax for the evening with her fiancé. They sit down on the couch together, they turn on the TV, switch over to the Streamberry app, and as they're scrolling through, they find a TV series called, you guessed it, Joan is Awful. Joan and her fiancé are obviously confused, and as they proceed to watch said Joan is Awful show on Streamberry, Joan suddenly gets the realization that this entire show is the exact day that she just lived. Secrets and all. This is where we're introduced to a kind of Truman Show-esque theme, which it's not even proper to call it Truman Show because it's almost the opposite. Whereas in Truman Show, he was kind of unaware of the fact for most of his life that he was on a TV show, where in this case, she immediately finds out and sees it, and then the episode proceeds with her trying to deal with it. As Joan watches in horror as her life quite literally flashes before her eyes, her fiancé eventually up and leaves after witnessing everything she's done today, i.e. kissing the old ex. The first thing that kind of threw me off guard, especially when they introduce the show that is a complete replica of Joan's life, is how quick the fiance is to believe it. Like, I can understand all the other side characters not really knowing what they're watching, but her fiance is so quick to jump to the fact that this must be real and it must be what's happening with Joan, that he just leaves. Doesn't even question her about it, really. Of course, he does ask to see her phone because in the TV show he saw her texting her ex, but she refuses to show him. So I guess in that way I would also be like, okay, bye girl. The next day, Joan's life is pretty much turned upside down. Everybody hates her. She loses her job. She can't even get legal action because of those silly little terms and conditions forms for Streamberry. Yeah, look out. Netflix is about to sell your likeness to make CGI generated shows. Netflix should be careful with putting themselves into a show like this. I know in Joan is Awful, it's called Streamberry, but it's very obviously a knockoff Netflix, especially since Streamberry uses the same interface and edits as Netflix does. My first thoughts when I first saw this scene of her trying to seek legal action kind of made me want to get rid of Netflix for a hot second. There is absolutely no way I'm letting a multi-billion-dollar corporation use my face and life story for a show, no matter how boring it is. I don't care if the show is only comprised of me laying in bed for hours on end scrolling on TikTok. You're not getting that, okay? Also, in true Truman Show fashion, after watching this, I was very hyper aware of the invisible cameras in the walls watching me. That's great. Basically, in this whole scene where she's trying to seek legal advice on what she can do and how she can resolve all this so she can get her life back, they do clarify that this Joan is Awful show within the show is a CGI AI generated content show, basically. It's almost like a literal reality show where it takes real life footage of somebody and, as they say, deep fakes faces of A-list actors, hence why Salma Hayek is playing Joan in the show. So Joan at this point is absolutely distraught. Her entire life is falling apart around her. She has absolutely no control over the situation and no more privacy. That does not exist anymore. So she devises a plan. The next day, she gets up. She's revving to go. Her plan is she is going to gain the attention of Salma Hayek herself. She's going to do something so outrageous that Salma Hayek doesn't even want to be a part of it. The scene that follows is just a manic panic of Joan eating an ungodly amount of discount Whoppers, washing it down with a cool, refreshing bottle of laxatives, then promptly barging into a wedding and proceeding to let out a little bit of steam, you could say. Honestly, this whole scene is glorious just for the sheer stupidity of it and the fact that it works. Joan gains the attention of Salma Hayek with this because Salma Hayek does not want her face involved with desecrating a church in more ways than one, if we're honest. So just like Joan did, Salma Hayek tries to seek legal action, but even she has nothing she can do about it. So you know what Salma does? She goes to Joan. She recruits Joan to take down the show themselves. And what is their now master plan? They're going to break into the Streamberry headquarters and smash the computer. I'm not kidding, that's actually pretty much what they say, is they're going to break in and smash the computer that's running the AI-generated content. Selma pretty much just walks into the Streamberry headquarters, asks to use the bathroom, and then she's suddenly just in the office. Like, that's it. She lets Joan in, they go up, and they start snooping around to find the computer they're looking for. Meanwhile, they also get to overhear an interview happening with the CEO of Streamberry. This next scene that follows is probably my favorite in the whole episode, only because it feels like the true statement piece of the episode and what it's trying to get across. We get to hear in the CEO of Streamberry's own words what exactly the Joan is Awful show really about. It is the first installment in a new programming system that they have aptly titled the Quamputer, which is capable of creating custom content for every viewer that logs into Streamberry. Now, on paper, I actually think this sounds insanely cool. Can you imagine logging into something like Netflix or Hulu and it having custom generated content for you? I'm almost imagining an AO3 but in video form where you just type in your tags of what you want to see and then it just generates an AI show for you. I'd be super curious to see something like this that properly works. Obviously, we don't really have the greatest AI technology currently to see that, but on paper, this sounds amazing. However, in the episode's universe, the CEO continues to explain how exactly they're going to market this new AI CGI generated content, basically creating just the same exact reality style show that they did for Joan, but for everybody. The interviewer that's talking to the CEO asks her, why is all the content so negative? The CEO responds, stating that when they did screen testing, they found that the more positive and affirming content really didn't engage the audience. They just didn't care about it. But when they switched over to the more negative concepts, this is what the CEO says. What we found instead was when we focused on their more weak or selfish or craven moments, it confirmed their innermost fears and put them in a state of mesmerized horror. She also expresses that they literally couldn't look away. This is why this is my favorite scene in the episode, because like I said, this is pretty much the thesis of the whole episode. This is something we see in real life today with actual reality TV. A lot of these producers and networks create content that is literally just meant for us to point and laugh or look at them and say, oh, at least I'm better than them, sort of thing. I'll admit I've done this. I've watched Hoarders simply to make myself feel better about the 4 dishes sitting on my desk for the last 2 weeks. I don't know if it's human nature that makes us want to compare ourselves to other for the validation that we're at least better than somebody, but this episode and this scene alone really brings that to light, because it is something that most, if not all of us, have done at one point or another. And the sad part about it is that most of the time we're aware of the fact that we're doing it, and we can't really help it in some extent. This scene also does a really good job at exposing the fact that we are aware of us doing this. The CEO continues to babble on about how she's so excited for this new marketing ploy for the streaming platform, and you can see on the interviewer's face just how shocked and almost disgusted she is with what the CEO is saying. It's the exact feeling I had when listening to the CEO, because it was a direct reflection of, again, what a lot of us do, especially on social media. I mean, the whole idea initially around social media was to compare ourselves to each other. That's how most of them work. Is it great? No. Is it good for us? No. We even see it within the episode itself, because up to this point, we've been watching Joan and everyone around her be consumed by this show. Joan quite literally just goes mad at one point and defecates a church. Desecrate. That's the word I'm looking for. She knows through the whole time that she's letting this show get to her, as well as Salma Hayek. The show gets to her to a level where she feels like she has to destroy it. But never once in the episode does somebody stop and say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to Joan, 'cause that's not good. After Joan and Salma finish listening into the interview, they proceed with their plan, and we are then treated to the climactic ending of the episode, where they do eventually destroy the Quamputer and supposedly are set free from this mind-bending reality loop that they're in. It does seem like they do get to break free and they go to live their lives happy and content. There's also a random Michael Cera cameo, which I completely forgot people mentioning that online, so that threw me for a loop. It really doesn't serve any other purpose than to feed into the whole CGI reality thing, so That's cool. Overall, I think this first episode of season 6 is a rather strong episode for Black Mirror. It weirdly feels kind of like a parody of a proper Black Mirror episode. Like if you compare it to something like Nosedive, which we discussed earlier, it feels almost comical compared to that, which I hate to say because I did genuinely enjoy watching this episode, but there's a lot of parts and a lot of way the characters react to things that just feel like a parody of Black Mirror. I did like the thought experiment with the whole CGI AI generated TV show. Like I said, I think on paper that's a really genius idea, but realistically, it probably would end up in something like this where people's lives would just be exploited with the use of AI generated content. Thank you for listening to me ramble on about a single episode of a TV series. I really appreciate it. And hey, if you've made it this far, you might as well press that subscribe button so you can catch more content in the future. I'm really looking forward to posting more content and videos, and I look forward to seeing you around.